Welcome to the Not Badger for the week ending February 26, 2016. Here, thanks to our overworked and underpaid diamond miners and sweatshop workers, we have compiled a collection of funny, interesting, and hopefully useful clips from our most watched shows. Enjoy the spoils of their hard work. In the Raging number 60, Mike and Allison attempt to unpack Anita Sarkeesian without allowing the old god embedded in her brain to swallow their sanity. Who says honey badgers don't have courage?
Far Cry 3 cast players as Jason Brody, a young white American man vacationing in Bangkok with his brother and their white friends.
God forbid, an industry, God forbid white people create media featuring them. Do you also go to Japan and complain about Japanese people creating media that features Japanese? No, you don't. It's just white people, isn't it?
I wonder how many people wonder why Nintendo's two most famous creations are European characters. An Italian plumber, and I think Link is Danish? Possibly Finnish. Don't ask me why. But if you know anything about design and the necessity of invention, Super Mario is no mystery at all. If you only have a few pixels to work with, I think 16 by 16 in Mario's original case, you basically can't draw lines. At least you can, but the lines will take up so much of the image that there'll be very, very little left over to make the character look solid. And if you can't draw lines, well, imagine drawing a cartoon without any lines. Imagine trying to draw a cartoon on a tea bag using only spray paint. You'd have to design a character from scratch just for that medium. And in the absence of line work, you find some interesting things. You can't draw a mouth that looks like a mouth, but you can draw a moustache that looks like a moustache. You can't draw hair that looks like hair, but you can draw a hat that looks like a hat. And you can't even draw a line between the trousers and the shirt, but you can draw overalls that look like overalls, because they have spots instead of a line. So, for purely ergonomic reasons, you find yourself with a mustachioed fellow in overalls and a cap. They simply drew the most human-looking humanoid they were capable of drawing in that medium. It just happens to look like a plumber because of the attire, and happens to look Italian because of the moustache. Shigeru Miyamoto is credited as his creator, but really, it was necessity that invented Super Mario. Sometimes, as a creator, all you have to do is manage necessity in a limited system. And an amazing thing happens where creations appear to be creating themselves.
This linking of sexism and racism is an example of what's called exotification.
Oh, no. You don't get to make up quasi-scientific terms just randomly in order to give your fucking shit authority. There's no such thing as exotified.
At least it's not in the dictionaries yet, but it's being popularized by feminists, so it probably will get into the dictionary quite soon. Exotification, noun, when a white man oppresses a non-white woman by liking her. Just like sexualization is when any man oppresses any woman by liking her. You know, sexualization, objectification, take your pick, same shit, different spray patch of verbal diarrhea. Yeah, if a man finds a woman exotic, he's exotifying her. If a man finds a woman athletic, he's athleticizing her. If a man finds a woman inspiring, he's inspirifying her. He's trapping her in his cave of muses. When a man thinks of an adjective, he is committing a verb. If that thought concerns one or more real or imagined female-bodied individuals. It's called thought crime. It's nothing new. This is feminism's bread and butter, and it's feminism's caviar.
These differences between Lana and Sia, two halves of the same being, directly link the color of their skin to their goodness and virtue, falsely suggesting that a lighter skin tone reflects a purer, more noble spirit.
Oh, I got this one. Hey, Anita, do you know one of the main differences between men and women? Men have darker skin. Almost invariably, that's why women are called the fairer sex. Almost invariably, across every single ethnicity and race, women have lighter skin tone. But of course, That isn't evidence of misandry.
In reality, lighter-skinned women of color are often depicted as more desirable and more virtuous because they come closer to meeting the culturally dominant white beauty standards. This insidious notion that a darker skin tone reflects a less moral or virtuous soul.
No, Anita. It's literally because when you're lighter skinned, you're more likely to be female. And women are more likely to embody innocence, vulnerability, and moral goodness in every single fucking society on Earth. That's why.
Also, pale things live in caves, and dark things live out in the sun. Not a rule, but certainly a trend. Melanin is what protects skin from the sun, and melanin is dark in tone, so it stands to reason any diurnal animal in which melanin is a feature will evolve darker skin the more time it spends out in the sun, or at least away from the shade.
I am getting pissed now. I am getting really pissed now. Because something that still affects men to this day, you are appropriating as your own issue as a white woman. This stereotype that black women were sexually aggressive and insatiable is exactly the same stereotype that has been applied to all men. All men. And it's exactly the same stereotype that justified those policemen, or those police people, or officers, telling this guy who wrote me this letter to tell me about how he was raped, and he went to the fucking police and was told that they were not going to press charges. And was talked out of pressing charges. Because effectively, it is legal for women to rape men. And then you get up here and you talk about this shit? In a world where it is still effectively legal for women to rape men, and men are still subject to this stereotype that they are aggressive and always up for it. And then you turn around and you blame men. Because this is what's going on here. You blame men despite them being part of the group that is subject to this stereotype. You blame them for applying it to black women.
In Polecat Cast number 101, we talk about the news of the week, including Milo, PewDiePie, cucumbers, and more. The mainstream media is trying to sell stuff. They're using fear, they're using manipulation, whatever it is, and they're usually trying to sell you whatever their sponsors are, because there usually are, sponsored content for the news, or they're trying to sell you a politician, or they're trying to sell you an idea which will lead to something later down the road, whatever it is, or they just have an agenda themselves, or they are what they call prostitutes, like they're on the bankroll for somebody, or they're any number of things.
Well, I guess
it's just
I think
recognizing
my point, just to clarify my point a little bit.
Yeah.
I think with games journalism though, it's a more personal sales thing.
For sure.
It's not this just amorphous like just product placement kind of thing. We're talking about a very specific niche focused kind of sales tool within games media and what they're doing. It's like, because gamers are focused on games.
Yeah.
It's like you look at the nightly news, you're seeing cars and politicians and sodas and fast food and this, that, you're seeing a myriad of different things. Whereas the gaming thing is very specifically focused.
For sure. I agree. And the only thing I just wanted to, the reason why I brought it up is that it's absolutely true. There is something personal, and it's also relatively clear cut. If you were into, like motorcycles and you got motorcycle magazines, you would have an expectation that the people that you are spending your money on just to consume their product of the magazine, they're going to be honest with you about what it is they're going to talk about. And if you find out that they're full of shit, which if you're really into motorcycles and they aren't, you'll find out right away, then you're going to want to expose that to other people because these people don't deserve to be the authority, essentially.
Right.
And I guess people just, have to kind of recognize that while this is definitely true of any sort of what you would call niche journalism that exists to usually sell a product or it's surrounding some kind of interest, the standard should also apply to mainstream journalism as well, obviously.
That people have been courting him like crazy to do that too.
Oh yeah. I mean, if
Holy
I
shit.
ran a video publication site of any type, anything that would host the videos, I would totally be contacting him, trying to get him to put his stuff on my site.
Yep. Like you said, they could. He he's in a unique position right now where he has said, he said this himself, and it's fairly obvious from the way that the media has reacted that they are irrelevant to him. He does not need them. So he can pretty much go anywhere he wants. I mean, he could go to VidMe, he could go to Daily Motion, he could go to Vimeo, for Christ's sakes. He could get, there's any place that he landed where he was just like, you know what, fuck YouTube, I'm out. They would explode overnight.
Yep.
They would absolutely fucking explode overnight without question, because he is going to bring with him the potential for ad dollars like crazy, because like now he's not beholden to Disney or YouTube, because I'm pretty sure they probably have somewhere in their contracts, and I'm speculating here, but I'm pretty sure that when they signed him, he probably had a non-compete thing where he couldn't sign with certain companies and this, that, and the other, because that's usually the case when you sign a big deal like that. So he could go anywhere and just start raking in money hand over fist from sponsors and all sorts of things. So I'm curious to see where he goes. I mean, I'm just like, because it's going to be really interesting. It's just going to get real interesting, because YouTube's going to be like, oh, fuck, we weren't making money before and we're making a lot less now.
I got to say, I never thought doing Honey Badger Radio I would end up doing a story on PewDiePie. I just never thought that would happen. And it's because, obviously his content is not at all even parallel or perpendicular to ours. It's like way over there somewhere, And until I guess I saw the mainstream media reach to the point, and I have to agree with Sargon on this, because this is the first thing I thought was they have absolutely no reason to go after PewDiePie except that he is a threat to them in terms of how popular he is. And if they can take him down, they can take down anyone. This is basically YouTube, assuming that it doesn't do any throttling or blocking or any suspicious activity like removing people's subscribers. If it was left alone, in many ways it is a very, very true form of meritocracy. You either make the videos people want to watch or you don't. And you don't necessarily have to have the best camera or the best microphone or the best acting or the best singing or anything. You just have to make stuff that people want to see. When Karen made her videos, she was in her kitchen on a MacBook. She didn't have a great camera. She didn't have a great microphone. And she just read her pieces. But that was what people liked about it, as an example, right? So you don't... And Pewds, he was part lucky, because I guess maybe it was the timing for him or whatever, but he became such a massive hit. The guy is like a multimillionaire, I think, right? And he does what? I mean, he makes some trolley videos and he reacts to like horror games or whatever, and he jokes around. And I mean, that's great. I don't have a problem with that. That's, like, go boy, like whatever. But the idea that the media would come after him and use such extremely ridiculous accusations, I mean, that should speak volumes as to what they're after. They don't care about the stuff that they propose, that they care about. They don't care about Nazis and all that shit. They just want to take him down a notch. They just want to they want to flex. Like they've basically gone unchallenged for a long, long time, and now there are regular people with cameras and like a few computer programs that are making content that well overtakes them in terms of the viewership. Well overtakes them, and they can't be wrangled in. I mean, Disney dropped him like he was they were doing him a favor. He doesn't need them. He doesn't even need Disney, I don't think. And
no, he doesn't.
I'm glad that he isn't gonna like take this shit lying down, and I'm glad that these other big YouTubers, as Max was saying, they are saying this is bullshit, and they're not putting up with it either. You got to draw the line. The line must be drawn here.
Something that you alluded to just a second ago, Brian, is that PewDiePie doesn't need them, and that they're trying to flex, for positioning, basically.
Sure.
What we're seeing, I think the big lesson here, what I think anyway, what I've taken from this is that you're looking at old media, you're looking at the Wall Street Journal, you're looking at print is fucking dead. Let's just fucking say, it's
Sure.
been on its last leg for a long time now, but it's fucking dead. Print is dead. When everybody has a fucking smartphone or a tablet or whatever that they can carry around and they can look up news articles just at the whim, print is dead. Nobody cares about a newspaper. And the problem is with PewDiePie is he is part of a new dynamic. He is part of new media, as it were. And new media moves way too fast and is way too savvy to how the internet works than, say, somebody like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, or whoever the fuck it is. They don't get it. They don't understand it. They don't have the wherewithal to understand that they need to adapt or they're going to die even quicker than they already are. And what they're trying to do when you look at things like what happened with JonTron and PewDiePie and whoever the next person they go after is, they're trying to slow it down. They're trying to get the reins on it. They're trying to get control of it again so that they can catch up. And I don't think they can, man. The fucking, the lightning is out of the bottle, as it were. The bull is out of the pen and it's running fucking wild at this point. And the funny thing is, like, we said before, is like, PewDiePie doesn't need them. He doesn't need Disney. He doesn't need YouTube. He is at a place where he has created his audience. He has garnered, over the last 6 to 7 years, whatever it's been, he has garnered so much goodwill with these people that they'll follow him wherever the fuck he goes. He could, like, get together some people and start up a new, video streaming network, and it'll fucking explode too. Or he could go somewhere that's already established or is becoming established. But yeah, this is just another example of old media not being able to cope with the rate at which people consume new media and information and the way it's consumed. They don't get it. They just do not get it at all.
You guys have no idea how, I mean, you probably do have quite an idea how controlling and obsessive women can get about this kind of thing. But it's, you get together with a group of women where there's no guy in the room, where they don't think about the fact that there's a guy in the room, and you'll hear bitching about this. And it's not all women, but there are women that seem to have this idea that men cannot be adults and do the right thing without female supervision. And it's stupid, because for the most part, the women that act that way have nothing about them that spells adult. They're incredibly childish, but projection is pretty normal for people who have significant flaws like that. And it's the controlling nature. And like I said, it's not all women, but the controlling nature is such that there's articles in women's magazines on how to control the men in your life. And it's been that way for as long as I've been reading magazines. It got to the point where I just didn't bother reading any magazines that were specifically for women, because the majority of what was in there was stuff like that and a bunch of frivolous crap, and occasionally you'd get a good recipe for something. And that stuff, I find it horribly offensive, but it's actually normal. It's not disapproved. It's not, well, some women act like that and we can't stop them from acting like that because they're assholes and every population has assholes. No, it's the norm in women's media. For those listening, if you found reason to criticize the way Milo worded some of the things he said about sex and sexuality and his experience, that's understandable. Even he has acknowledged that he was inarticulate, and that's not really what I'm about to speak to. This is directed at those who jumped on the bandwagon to wholesale, hands down, demonize him on Monday for having the screaming audacity to have given you an example of the damage that is done when a kid is sexually exploited. Righteous anger in response to terrible things being done to children is more than understandable. But when your response to that anger becomes the obstacle to the abuse victim's recovery process, you become the abuser. At that point, I don't care how you feel about victims, perpetrators, this particular criminal phenomenon itself, or anything related to it, even if you are another victim. Another person's experience and how he deals with it are not about you. His rate and manner of recovery from the psychological damage done by sexual abuse he experienced is not about you. An angry, bitter, sarcastic joke he makes about what was done to him is not about you. The tone in which he makes that joke is not about you. His decision to differentiate between underage sex that cannot and should not be considered consensual and his own May-December relationship once past the age of consent with a significantly older man is not about you. His personal journey of seeking angers regarding his own sexuality and how his experience of abuse may have affected his personal sexual development is not about you. His opinion on himself being an outlier to the normal rate of growing young human beings' sexual and psychological development is not about you. It is not pedo-apology to acknowledge that child abuse alters the child's development. This is part of why sexually abusing a child is understood to be such a reprehensible act. Being sexually abused during one's childhood or early adolescent stage of social emotional development has an impact on the rate, direction, and nature of one's social emotional development. That is part of how we are wounded when we are exploited during a time in our lives when we're not sexually or emotionally developed enough to handle the degree of nature of intimacy in a sexual interaction with another person. In fact, it's vital to the recovery of the victim to acknowledge and consider that. If we cannot attest to our wounds without your only response being public shaming for their nature, scope, and messy manifestation, how the hell do you expect us to ever heal? The kind of hysterical, knee-jerk reaction to the, by the way, false presentation of Milo's words exemplify a significant part of what keeps victims of childhood sexual abuse from seeking and obtaining therapeutic treatment for the damage done to us by our abusers. This is not your political or emotional playground. This is our lives, our experiences, our pain, our derailed development, our demons. What do you think would ever possess us to talk about our experiences and the wounds they've left on us when we know that purportedly well-meaning virtue signalers are going to react to our objection to having been exploited by exploiting any inarticulateness in our describing of it for good guy points? What the hell do you think you're doing when you engage in that behavior? Do you think you're protecting victims? Because you're not. You're driving us deeper into the shadows where we can avoid being psychologically eviscerated a second time by the sharp edges of your black and white mentality. And really, that suits the interests of those whose fellowship is built around sexually exploiting children and young adolescents, because it keeps us, both the victims and society in general, from engaging in the very much needed discussions which could lead to a productive and efficient approach to preventing future abuse, the thing that should be the ultimate goal of any public discussion on this topic. We know child abuse of any kind is reprehensible. We know what a violation it is, and we know the harm it does. What we don't know is why it's more important to the public to wallow in outrage over that than discuss prevention. Which do you care more about? Your own self-righteous, self-indulgent virtue signaling, or protecting kids from sexual predators? If you have listened to everything I've said, yet are still unwilling to consider the possibility that demonizing Milo may be unproductive and an unjust reaction, if you're too offended at the idea that such narcissistic posturing detours from pathways to prevention, for you to recognize, for you to engage in discussion without demonizing a recovering victim for the way he talks about the problem and its effects, then whether you admit it or not, the self-indulgent path is your answer. And if so, congratulations, your mudflinging is the utmost in underhanded pedo-apology. Your form of exploitation is no more kind to those of us who have been victimized than that which you profess to hate. I am a victim. I'm a recovered victim of childhood sexual abuse. I was around 5 when the molestation began. I support Milo's statement that age of consent laws are right. I support Milo's right to his own recovery from the abuse he experienced. And I support Milo's right to talk about his experiences and their impact, even inarticulately, without being trampled by stampeding virtue signalers on their way to the Virtue Points feeding trough. How dare you, you self-aggrandizing, cannibalistic pigs!
The reason why I felt that this story was important has less to do with Milo and more to do with the media and their tactics and what they're doing and why. And that's why I find it's related to PewDiePie, even if the accusations are not the same, but the goal is the same. The media is destroying opponents, some of whom they feel are a threat to them, and some of whom they just want to be able to show that they can if they chose to. So if the media was, for example, able to take down PewDiePie, then they could say, look, we took this guy down. It's almost like making an example out of someone, and he was just a prime target. It had nothing to do with his beliefs, because we don't really know what they are. He's an entertainer. He just does edgy shit, and people like it. And the media doesn't, they're not really in tune with this generation of people that are essentially raised on the internet for all their entertainment. So they're just like, well, he's the most popular. Let's see if we can take him down. In the case of Milo, they find him dangerous. And that's not meant to be a pun, but they find it to be dangerous in the same way that they find other sort of independent media people. Like, yes, many of them are conservative, but you see, there are also a lot of liberal media people and a lot of moderates and libertarian ones, but those people are more difficult to demonize. So they go after the conservative ones because they find them to be more of a threat. Plus, they've already created this kind of caricature of what a conservative pundit looks like. So they can just say, well, just like Bill Hannity or whatever, these like Fox News nut jobs that are often the characterization. So they go after Milo because they find him to be a threat. They haven't gone after her yet, but they're going to go after Tommy Lauren. They've tried that as well. And this is not me defending those people. This is me saying that the media does not play fair, and they have no interest in doing so, and they have to be held accountable. If this is what I stand by, because this is how I see this whole discussion around culture and politics and philosophy and ideas. Okay, I don't give a shit about whether you're on the left or the right or the center. I want to know who's got the best ideas, who's got the best facts, what is the fucking truth. And the media they're the worst at doing that. Instead, they say this is the story, and then they get rid of everybody they don't like that doesn't go along with it.
It's so hypocritical of the media to come out now and after excusing and promoting and so on to come out now and attack Milo like this. And there's discussion that needs to be had, and it's not good that the way the media gives pedophiles that platform presents the proclivity as a normal thing and a healthy thing, because it's not. Mm-hmm. But it is good for the public to be aware of the mentality that goes along with it, because it does feel normal to them, and that's part of the problem. And a lot of people end up in that cycle because they were molested. Mm-hmm. And it's the research that I've been doing is, and like I looked into this simply because I kept wondering, why didn't that happen to me? Why didn't I develop that? The more I learned, the more I wondered, how did I escape? And it looks to me like the reason that I grew up and turned out, I did go through a hard road of other problems, but I turned out to be okay. And I didn't ever develop an interest in any kind of sexual interest in children. It's probably because I was not raised in a violent environment. I was raised in a very nurturing and caring and loving environment where there wasn't somebody teaching me that love was a transactional thing, and there wasn't somebody teaching me that violence is the way that you deal with conflict or get what you want and things like that. And I think it's the same thing that happens with other forms of sexual predation, is that the percentage of people who end up with that behavioral disorder, that come out of having been victimized and then end up in that mindset, I think they're affected by violent environments, and they're affected by circumstances that are not nurturing, and where they maybe do learn that relationships are transactional rather than mutually supportive and caring. And it's we can't have those discussions, and we can't get to the bottom of that and see if there are therapies that can help people expand their ability to relate to other people. And maybe, not saying like conversion therapy where you force somebody to adopt a new sexuality, but it may very well be that there are people who, if their ability to relate to other people is expanded to adults, will find that they are not pedophiles when they thought they were. That they are not, it wasn't the youth that they were sexually attracted to, but the fact that they are threatened by maturity and independence. And that's, I kind of identified that in my perpetrator. Just looking back in hindsight, he related to me because he was afraid of people who were his own age and older. And it just is sickening to think that we could never find a way to help somebody in that circumstance, because we can't have that discussion, because the moment you let them talk, you're bad. And I'm not saying that it's not wrong for media to use them to portray this dysfunction as normal. But it is wrong to say that this dysfunction has to be hidden in a closet and nobody should examine it and see what we can do to fix the problem. Our last story, the Milo story, that was basically a story about our society fetishizing outrage. And it's how sick it is in our society that we do that, and the damage that it does. And the 50 Shades story is a story of our society fetishizing abuse. Because I remember discussing this when the first movie came out. Isn't the guy's proclivity in the story a result of his having been abused? This is, and here there's all these women going to watch a story of a psychologically damaged man who cannot have a relationship and who cannot have intimacy without living out the symptoms of his psychological damage. As part of the reason, if I remember right from blogs I read back then, it's part of the reason why some parts of the BDSM community were so outraged over the story and how it portrayed BDSM. And this latest one, I've only seen previews 2 or 3 times on television, because I don't watch a lot of TV, and I don't know if they play it very often, or if it's not played very often because of the nature of the movie. But it looks like this one involves a past relationship that went sour, and an obsessive ex, and that dysfunction. So now it looks like they're fetishizing dysfunction even further. And just that we can get away with that in our society, fetishize dysfunction like that, rather than think of how sad it is that somebody ends up in that mentality, in that situation, and not have compassion and healing at the forefront of our mind, but that women would bring cucumbers into the theater and masturbate to it, and people would think it was funny that they were doing it. That's very sad to me.
In the rant circa number 77, Emma Watson wrestles and struggles with men's aversion towards joining her cult. She is a missionary from the Ministry of Equality, after all. Missionary.
What I would really love to focus on is there's a lot of missing data in that we have about women and girls, and there's a lot of these gaps.
Wait. All right, stop. We have a lot of missing data.
No. There's a lot of missing data that we have. That
About women and girls.
by definition that it's not missing. If you have it, it's not missing. But on women and girls, like, because women and girls are not the most studied demographic in society,
At least when it comes to victimization or any kind of vulnerability.
or like difficulty or disadvantage, or
It's almost like society likes it when women are damsels, when women need to be saved. It's almost like that, eh, Karen?
you know,
Almost.
you might be going too far with that, Allison, but probably not.
I'll take your tepid approval and I'll run with it. Presumably he for she is about creating equality. Here's the thing, Emma. And I know that we're trying to delve into the depths of your intellect, but you're not off to a very good start here, because when you create an equivalent statement, you need to measure both sides. So you're saying that there's data missing on the female side? There's almost none on the male side. None that I've ever heard you talk about, except some sort of vague, if you support feminism, somehow men will be better off.
No, if you support
For reasons.
feminism, maybe men will stop killing themselves, because somehow, and men will be allowed to be vulnerable and human too, right? So, feminism being the radical notion that women are human, and also the radical notion that men need feminism in order to become human too, or something.
And that's equality. Yay! I mean, seriously, if you're the champion of equality, shouldn't you be also looking for the data for men and boys? I'm just a little bit confused, and I know this is petty, but is she trying to smirk or look concerned?
Look concerned.
Yeah, well, she's getting sort of in the middle there. It's a little bit uncanny valley. I just want to, this is an equality officer, basically. This is an individual from the Ministry of Equality that's telling us we need more information on one side in order to create equality. It just boggles the mind. How do people listen to this and not just be either confused as hell by this individual saying, we haven't measured X enough, we need to measure X enough, and never, ever, ever talking about the measurement of Y? And how do they reconcile that with her being some sort of equality officer from the Ministry of Equality?
Well, because it's very, very easy to assume when somebody says that women have it worse than men, or women are worse off than men in any way where we feel a sort of a disproportionate amount of sympathy or compassion for women, such as in terms of being victimized and marginalized, right? It's very easy for people to just believe that is something that's been proven. It's been, you don't need to measure Y. We already know that the equation stands on its own. X is greater than Y. The victimization of women is greater than the victimization of men. That's already a formula in people's brains, right? She's just confirming that by saying, well, we need to see how bad women actually have it, right? We need a little bit more data to really determine how bad women have it and how to solve those problems, right? Based on that fundamental equation that everybody just takes as a given. And so, yeah, lots of people are going to say, yeah, no, that makes total sense to me, because they're not assessing it logically. They're assessing it through their emotions, and their emotions are telling them that, violence against women is always wrong. Always, 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 and things like that. So,
okay, just to put it out there, just to float it out there to the feminists who might be listening. If people uncritically accept your assertion that women have it worse, no matter what. You don't have to actually explain, yeah, I have measured X and Y, and I've come to this, I've developed this formula for how to compare the various different sufferings that men and women have. And I've been very comprehensive about both sides, and everything is clear and above board. If you don't see that, what is it that you're basing the logic on? Because you're not basing it on logic. You're not basing it on reason. You're not basing it on research. So what is it you're basing your automatic assumption that women have it worse on? Could it be because you think that women are weak, and weak people automatically already have it worse? And in that case, how can you complain? How can feminists complain about the social attitudes towards women that allow them to uncritically assert their women worsting narrative, and then complain that the same social attitudes towards women are bad in the context when it comes to being leaders and soldiers and policemen and everything? Because guess what? If you want to enjoy the privilege of uncritically being able to assert that women have it worse, without anybody ever asking you to actually prove it logically or rationally in any context, if you want to have that, the flip side of that is that women are going to be seen as weak, and people are not going to want them in positions of leadership or in positions where they have to be saved by them. They're going to be like, nope. They're going to nope themselves right out of that, but for exactly the same reason that Emma Watson can sit there and not ever be challenged. That she is the minister of equality, and she doesn't look at any other side but one. It's the same principle that underlies both. Women and people perceive women as weak. Therefore, all that Emma Watson has to do to prove women's oppression is just give a list, a completely non-contextualized list of their sufferings. And nobody ever says, well, what's going on with men? Because women are weak. So they obviously are always worse off than men. But at the same time, nobody wants a weak person for a leader.
Rather than just gender equality across the board. This isn't girls are better than boys, boys are better than girls. This is just everyone deserves.
And what you're saying is men have had men throughout all of history have been treated equally, but women have been treated unequally. Right? Like, I don't, like, we're talking about gender equality here. We're not talking about men being treated, how some men are treated compared to other men. We're talking about male privilege and female oppression, right? We are talking about men being the default in terms of how they should be treated, how human beings should be treated. That is essentially the entire premise of feminism. You treat men this way, you should treat women that way too. Oh, except in this and this and this and this and this, because if you did, that would be like misogyny or some, like, I don't, stop pretending it's about equality. Like, if you're going to keep the name feminism, if you're going to keep the term patriarchy, if you're going to keep fucking going the way you're going, stop saying it's about equality. Stop saying that it's about something it's not. It's not about equality.
It's right in the founder's words. Society is to be judged by the benefit towards women. It affords women. And you can tell from the examples that Charles Fourier makes that he does not give a shit about the situation for men. Literally, society should be judged exclusively, only, and solely on the benefits it affords women.
So every woman could be living like a queen, and every man and every child could be living like slaves. But if you could organize society, in some way that would provide more benefit to women than they already have living like queens, if they could all live like empresses, then you are failing women.
Yeah, basically. And this entire movement has come out of that source. And what a surprise. Everything good is named after women. Everything bad is named after... And the devil is literally a social system created by men to benefit men. Think about the parallel here, like the mirror image here. Feminism was founded. Society should be judged morally by how it benefits women. And what's its devil? Is a social system that is designed specifically to benefit men over women. Its devil is an exact opposite of itself. That it supposes, and feminism looks at its devil and says it is so huge and powerful relative to us. We're the exact exact opposite measure. We're not just good, we are also for the benefit of women. We are the exact opposite of measure of what we call patriarchy. And patriarchy is so much more powerful than us, even though it has absolutely no fucking paper trail. It has any use of hard influence, of any kind of influence, either social, financial, political, will leave a paper trail of some sort. And yet patriarchy leaves no paper trail. No phone calls, no memos, no letters, no goddamn invoices. No forensic accountant would ever be able to find patriarchy anywhere in the world. And yet we can find feminism, which is the system by which society is judged for the benefit of women. We can find feminism everywhere. Feminism has a paper trail the size of the fucking Grand Canyon.
Yeah, well, just the paperwork at UN Women.
Yeah, it's the paper trail that feminism leaves is probably worth in itself. The refuse that they fill landfills in, just leaving a trail of their activities, is probably worth millions of dollars. Just their garbage is worth millions of dollars. And yet they still keep turning around and pointing to this evil character known as patriarchy, this gigantic monolithic institution that there is absolutely no evidence of. There's no paper trail of. Look at the framing here. Feminism is judging society by how it benefits women. And misogyny is any questioning of feminism. So any questioning and saying, hey, maybe society should benefit people other than women? Can that be a thing? That's misogyny. Any questioning of that is misogyny. This is the framing. Any questioning that society should be created for the benefit of white people is racism against white people.
Well, and
this
you know
is,
what
this is what she's constructing.
No, and she's taking the same tack that Rebecca Watson did, and that Anita Sarkeesian has, in the sense of, misogyny is all around us. It's there. And, but people have to be educated in how to see it, right? In how to notice it. And it's like, so you can literally have books on the shelves in your kids' school called, school library called Boys Are Stupid, Throw Rocks at Them. That's not a problem. But, if you sort of make this bizarre, convoluted case for why women getting custody of their kids almost always when they request it, right? That's actually based on misogynistic assumptions about the role of women. That totally, once you point it out, it makes total sense. Once you make the case for it, once you go through all of the gymnastics that are required to explain how a woman getting exactly what she fucking wants and a man being excluded from the lives of his children against his protests by a social and legal institution, right? How that's actually prejudice against women. Once you make that case, people can see it. Once you actually explain it to them, like it should be explained.
Yeah, it's like you're pushing this rock down a hill that totally doesn't exist, according to Emma Watson.
If you fix all of women's problems, men's problems will magically be fixed.
Well, they'll transcend, because we'll be in a society a perfect society. A perfect society is a society which manages to give women every single possible benefit, including every single possible conceivable future benefit ever. That would be a perfect society. And when men are in that perfect society, they will transcend into and have all their problems will be gone, because women's problems will be gone.
Disappear.
They'll just magically disappear. But I'm going to emphasize this. She has said, she's indicated that men do not like the term feminism because it's referring to everything good and it's tying it to women. Oh, God forbid that a group of people be like, you're tying everything negative to us and everything positive to yourselves, and be upset with that. And she's saying that when men point that out and they say, well, we're sort of getting the feeling like feminism is a supremacy movement, she is essentially saying, no, feminism is about equality. And you believe that it's a supremacy movement because you're just so full of patriarchal evil. This is essentially the framing that I'm getting. Is nobody else getting this framing?
Yeah, no, I'm getting that.
No,
Yeah.
I don't have to prove that feminism is actually not about supremacy. I don't have to prove that. You have a problem in questioning feminism. Essentially, she's making men into problems because they are questioning feminism. That's pretty fucked up, my friend. Somehow, by blaming all men, she's not blaming this individual man.
Yeah.
But blaming all black people for crime, she's not blaming an individual black person for. Do you realize what you just said there?
Because there's Uncle Toms, Allison, and there's house niggers, and you can't blame the
Karen,
Uncle Toms and the house niggers. You can only blame the thugs and the 50 cents and the
no. That she's actually saying the exact opposite. If she was actually saying this to a black person, this would be regarded as racist. It is not the choices of individual black people to create crime. It is the responsibility of blackness itself that creates crime.
Yeah.
Do you fucking realize what you just fucking said, Emma? And then you turn around and say your movement isn't a supremacy movement?
Oh.
It's not individual men who create crime. It's just the collective choices of all men. Therefore, all men have a share of a small amount of guilt, if not all of the guilt for crime everywhere. You have just made, if you made that statement to black people, you would be rightly called out for being a fucking bigot. But somehow, when you make the statement that it's not individual men who are responsible, but all men, and some sort of collective guilt, somehow when you direct it at men, everybody just, their brains just fall out of their head and they're like, yeah, you're right. That makes it so much better. It's not me as an individual that makes me bad. It's my penis. It's my black skin. Oh, that makes it better. That makes it so much better, Emma Watson.
On Pussycat Cast number 3, we talk about more news of the week, including a woman who filed a false rape allegation, a woman's only wing in the workplace, and witches against Trump.
Feminists make a big deal about false accusations being prosecuted, being something that might scare genuine victims away from reporting. But the thing is, if you hold false accusers to the same standard of evidence, if you hold prosecution of false accusers to the same standard of evidence for any other crime, then unless your accusation can be conclusively proved false, you're not at risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's my only take on it. It debunks the feminist claim that this would scare accusers who had a genuine accusation away from reporting crimes to police.
Someone in the chat asked, what would have happened to the men if they were actually found guilty or convicted of rape? Because this is a false rape accusation.
Well, it depends on where where did this happen again?
New York.
Yeah, I think there's pretty heavy sentencing for rape in the United States, depending on the circumstances. They can go to jail for years and years.
It could have been because there were two men that she slept with. It could have been considered a gang rape. I don't know if that's considered worse or not.
Yeah, the circumstances that compounds it. Whether or not they used a weapon can compound it. Whether or not it can be compounded if they used physical force versus whether it was a drunk situation. Because it shows more intent if they were sober and used weapons than if everybody was drunk and they did something stupid and then they still get convicted of rape. So it's, they could have been in some real deep shit.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. The sentence for being convicted of rape in the first degree is up to 25 years in prison.
Yeah, this is why it is so serious when you file a false charge. You're not just putting somebody through an investigation that doesn't cause them any problems in their lives. And the thing is, there will be people on that campus who will think these guys got away with doing something bad, even though she came out and confessed that she filed a false charge. And that's it in every case. Even when the guy is exonerated, there are still people in his life who treat him like he should have been convicted. And I'm not saying that every conviction is proof of guilt and every exoneration is proof of innocence, but an exoneration is proof that there wasn't proof of guilt. And it's not right or fair to claim that a person is still guilty if they've been exonerated. But it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it that much worse to knowingly falsely accuse someone.
It just goes to kind of show you the priorities, rather than the possibility of having her honor impugned. She would rather possibly ruin these two men's lives. It's just priorities, man.
Well, and that just cements why we should not treat false accusations differently when the accusation is rape. If somebody files a false charge, they have filed a false charge. If they have tampered with evidence, they've tampered with evidence. If they commit perjury, they've committed perjury. Particularly if they've committed perjury to hide information or to create false information that points to guilt or covers exculpatory evidence. And this is something that should not be treated any differently in a rape case than in a murder case or a burglary case or a fraud case. It's all the same crime. It's still false accusations. It's still false charges. It's still perjury. It's still tampering with evidence. And it doesn't matter why you did it. It's still criminal. Just like it doesn't matter why you kill somebody outside of self-defense, immediate self-defense, it's still criminal. Even if your life was really hard because of that person, if you shoot them, you're still a murderer. You know, even if your life is really hard because you feel victimized, if you commit perjury, you're still a perjurer. It's common sense. And it's important that we keep it that way, because we do not want people to end up imprisoned falsely. And we do not want the charge of any serious criminal offense to be watered down by the knowledge that it's a frequent thing for people to be falsely imprisoned because people who make accusations are entitled to lie.
You can just see by these examples, it's clearly not a real thing. I don't know how they could even possibly claim it's a real thing. They think guys having a joke but amongst each other is evidence of acceptance of rape. Look at these stories that we've covered already tonight. There's no way.
Well, and they also seem to fail to consider the possibility that the treatment of male victims of female perpetrators might be a real rape culture. Like, the only rape culture we have in the United States is the fact that in feminist-led research, male victims specifically, of female perpetrators specifically, are actually deliberately ignored via definitions created for the purpose of cutting them out of the equation. That's a rape culture. That's tolerance for rape. That's a pervasive attitude, a belief that it's not the same when a woman does it to a man. But we don't have to deal with that, you know? Mm-hmm. We don't have to talk about that because they don't want to. On the other end, anytime a woman makes an accusation, if she's not believed, even if evidence comes out later to prove that she lied, it's rape culture because we didn't believe her, and you should never doubt a victim, you know, unless he's a guy. And it's just the hypocrisy and the ridiculous level of obvious hatred there. Like, all men are automatically guilty, and we don't care if they're victims. That's absolute hatred, and it's an absolute social construct. It's very, very profitable to convince women that they should be so intimidated around men that they have to have their own special place. And that doesn't count as segregation, and it doesn't make them inferior. It's an amazing amount of money is made by feminist organizations and then organizations that piggyback on feminist ideas, just doing that, convincing women to be scared and intimidated and feel like a separate species from men and all this other stuff, but not feel segregated and not feel like being that way makes them inferior.
Exactly. That's how you keep a hamster in a cage. You convince it that it wants to run in that little wheel. It's my decision. I made this decision. Sure, you did.
I don't know. I always did that by putting the food in there. They like to go where the food is, but it's I wouldn't quite call it Stockholm syndrome. The way women who conform to these ideas never examine them. I would call it laziness, like intellectual laziness. You're getting told that the other half of the species you belong to is so intimidating or disgusting or terrible or whatever that you have to be separate from them in order to avoid conflict or avoid negative circumstances or whatever. That you got to have segregation, and yet you're not inferior because of that. And it's how can you not figure that out and not be lazy as shit?
So the thing about men and women, and we kind of touched upon this with the way schools are currently sort of catered to more of a female way of learning. And, we know this about humans, that we have about 4 or 5 different ways of learning based on the 5 different senses. Just in general, different people have different things that make sense to them. Some are visual learners, some are tactile learners, etc. Well, this goes double for male and female. We have theoretically, in terms of development, male brains are about a year behind female brains because they're working on developing slower, and they're developing different things, and they're also developing the body as well as the brain, while girls, don't really have as much musculature, etc. So there's a bit of a difference in development in that sense, but there's also a difference in what boys and girls need in order to learn. And we've seen this actually with male teachers. Male teachers, for instance, provide a certain structure that helps both young boys and girls. But we know that there's basically different ways of approaching life between men and women, and there's different strengths and weaknesses and different ways of learning and different ways of teaching. And so we have seen consistently schools become more and more towards the female way of learning. And we actually have society that is extremely talkative and loud, and with the advent of advertising, everything's like sort of in our faces and flashy and busy. And I think everybody needs a break from that in general, but men in particular, I think, need spaces where they can just be. And that's why barbershops have traditionally been a thing, because on one hand, if you do want to talk, you will talk with men who are your speed, your frequency in terms of how many words they say, because men and women have a different ratio of words they say per minute. So not only are you going to be around people who are more your wavelength, but when you do talk, you're going to talk about like crass jokes or personal things that women just cannot understand because they don't have a dick, they don't have a wife, they don't have, everything that men have. But then when you don't want to talk, you can just be, and other guys will get it. And so there's a need for just silence sometimes for men. So there is a lot to say, or there's a lot there. To say that men need sort of a place where they can just hang out together without any women. And it has nothing to do with like not liking women or having misogyny or any of that. It's just a different way of being around people who are like you. And there's an essence in that women also like. They want to be around other women for whatever reasons. And why do they look down on men wanting to have that? Men are humans too. Men have needs too. Men, just because you don't understand men and how they are so different than you and how they don't have a need to talk or to talk about their emotions every 5 seconds, doesn't mean they don't have them. Doesn't mean they're all that much different from you.
We've gotten to a point where one narrow viewpoint on each end has been made the definition of a particular label. Mm-hmm. And so you have like people confusing libertarianism and anarchy, and people confusing conservatism and religious traditionalism, and people confusing liberalism and progressivism. And we've gotten to a point where we need to sort of revamp what we are calling ourselves.
Well,
because I don't fit neatly into any of those categories, but I'm probably the closest to libertarian than I am to any of those other things. And the classic liberal, because there have been people that are in the chat that were asking, what does a classic liberal constitute? And from my understanding of liberalism, the classic liberal, the baby boomer and back generation of just liberal rather than the progressive liberal, is the person who believes in your right to make your own decisions about the life that you lead without people persecuting you for being different, and the person who takes a charitable attitude to people in rough circumstances. But they're not necessarily the individuals that take that to the degree that the progressive takes, where there's the progressive stack and there has to be a caste system based on that progressive stack, and there has to be a huge burgeoning welfare system based on the idea that people in general can't take care of themselves. It's a totally different thing from that liberal idea that if somebody's had something bad happen to them and they need a leg up, that it's good for other people to help get them that leg up. It's the teach a person to fish rather than just give them one every day.
It's about
attitude.
individual freedom.
Yeah, and the classic conservative is really not all that different from the classic liberal. The difference is that the classic liberal may see more government intervention as a solution, and the classic conservative may see more community intervention independently of the government as the better solution. And the libertarian doesn't necessarily think we should leave everybody to their own devices either, but simply looks for minimal government intervention in people's lives. So between the three of them, if you look at like the more classic end of it, there are very subtle differences between the two, but they mostly all believe in treating people the same way. And it's the conservative end, you see more belief that if there's going to be government intervention, it should be in terms of moderating people's moral behavior. And at the classic liberal end, it seems to be more in terms of moderating people's financial behavior. And the libertarian end, it seems to be in terms of, government should be limited to structure and defense, and we let people deal with the consequences of their own moral and financial fuck-ups, and unless they're endangering their own lives or the lives of the people around them, and then we have to respond. So I mean, it's like we get too wrapped up in these extremist ends, the progressive, the supremacists of various ethnicities, the people who think that it's okay to impose their religious beliefs on everybody, or their hatred of religious beliefs on everybody, or their particular lifestyle choices on everybody, and it ruins the entire discussion.
Yeah. Well, and I want to add that even within the labels, which is why I don't like them, and I'm not just one of those like, I don't like labels because I don't. I just think that it's a way to start a conversation, but it's often used as a way to end conversation when it comes to labels. So I'd rather ask people, because even within progressives themselves, there are progressives that don't share the same ideas of what that means. Like for example. When I was in the ICMI in London, and I was talking to someone about the whole men's thing, and we were bouncing ideas about how to raise more awareness, how to sell it essentially to young people, that kind of thing. And I'm sorry, something just fell for some fucking reason. They said, well, the thing about men's rights is it's a real progressive issue, because it's something that no one ever talks about. So you could actually sell it as a real progressive issue. And I have a natural aversion when I hear it, because I think of the Young Turks and these people that, cut people up in slices of pie according to their race and gender and sexual orientation. But I could see where that person's coming from, and they consider themselves to be a progressive. And I met a person who took really good care of Mike and I when we went to LA for the Red Pill screening, and he also considered himself a progressive, but he was also very much in favor, of men's issues being raised and discussed. So my point of that is that even within the groups under that would necessarily fall under an umbrella with a label, it's important for us to be more curious and ask questions and engage them in conversation before we assume what their beliefs are simply because they may call themselves something. So for my part, I find the easiest way to lump, what I find, what I think is important to me to defend or stand for, and something that I want to stand against or I reject, is there are people who want to be left alone, and then there are people who will not leave other people alone. And I'm the kind of person who resists people who do not want to leave other people alone. And I don't think that that is a left or right issue per se.
Lastly, on Fireside Chat number 49, I talked to YouTuber, gamer, and fellow Doge, Rags. He's basically like my evil twin, but more gay.
You made videos, some of them are like participating in these, this PC Master Race console war stuff. Some of it is maybe you're just talking about games that you like or games that you hate. But why did you get involved with talking about like PBS, social justice warriors, and all these authoritarians? Like, how did you get wrapped up in that kind of stuff? And why did you take
a part of it is a part of it is because a lot of the people I follow on Twitter and a lot of the people that I watch on YouTube are of that crowd. The Sargons and Harmful Opinions and the Kraut and Teas and things like that. And it's something that interests me. And there is definitely a crossover between those kinds of attitudes and opinions and that mindset, and it can bleed into gaming. And it can affect what we play and affect our hobby. And I've got a lot of influence, and I would like to defend the hobby that I like. And I would like to keep these toxic, poisoning sorts of mentalities out of it and combat them in the open for everyone to see. And I want to get rid of a lot of these negative stereotypes a lot of that gamers tend to get. I want to ensure that developers have the most freedom to do and say whatever they want, or to create whatever kinds of narratives and adventures and creations that they want to put together without feeling that they got someone breathing down their neck, or they're not allowed to do it, or they're not doing it right, or that makes them bad people. Because this is the kind of thing that gets me. It's relatable when you see stuff like this in a hobby that you enjoy. When somebody talks about something that happens somewhere in the world, when you talk about migrants in Sweden, when you talk about mosques in like UK, when you talk about something happening in California, it's distant. But when you sit down at a video game and you can say to yourself, this is something that someone might want to be taking away from me. This might be something that people want to change. This might be something that people want to push a political agenda with. Then it becomes a lot more real to people. And a lot of it is this is my hobby and I enjoy it and I don't want you to fuck with it.
Agreed. What's like some of the stuff that's actually happened in game development that has pissed you off? Like some of the stuff that's going on.
It's not as much the things that have actually happened as the things that will happen unless people resist those kinds of ideas. And I'd say like at least voice opposition to. People can make whatever they want, do whatever they want.
Sure.
But like the video I'm doing now is someone who's saying that Horizon Zero Dawn's a feminist game.
Oh, that's the one with the cave woman that's shooting arrows at robo dinosaurs?
Yes.
Okay.
But you get into these ideas. At the beginning of the video, she says, I want to take a look at this game from a feminist perspective.
Oh.
And when you have to put the glasses on, you put them on enough times, you can't take them off eventually. There's going to be a point where if you keep going on, you're not going to be able to look at things from anything other than a feminist perspective. Mm-hmm. And when a developer gets that into their head, when a publisher gets that into their head, then things will change for the end user.
In terms of these situations where people are colonizing subcultures and hobbies, they're always using exactly the same narrative to do it. And we actually identified this in 2013. We were talking about, even before Gamergate happened, we were talking about how people, like the establishment, uses the same narrative to colonize subcultures and hobbies that they want to control. And what they do is they say, this subculture and this hobby is victimizing women in this way. It's harmful or exclusionary towards women. And that's their in to get in and start controlling everything, controlling creative freedom, controlling the social landscape. And in my opinion, what short circuits the narrative itself is actually being aware of men's issues. Because you can say, hey, because this is basically weaponized damseling, and the only way you can do that is if it isn't something that men face as well. Because the instant you bring men into the equation, nobody gives a shit anymore.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's just, it's just men. It's all men in history and men.
Yeah, well, it's like, if women are subject to harassment on Twitter, we care. If men are also subject to harassment on Twitter, we stop giving a shit.
Who cares?
Who cares?
When that shit came out, everyone's like, "Oh, this will kill him. This will destroy him." It's like, come on, seriously, people. What the hell? This was that was like 12 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was on a bus talking to his jock friends, and someone sent me a picture of how I said, Donald Trump's not misogynist. He's just an old man. He's like, he doesn't hate women. That's ridiculous. And someone sent me a text picture of the quote, and it was saying, "The President of the United States." It's like, first off, that's super disingenuous to say that. That's like saying, "Honey, I have to go take a shit." Barack Obama. Like, don't tell me he hasn't said that. Right? It's disingenuous to quote someone as the POTUS when he said that X many years ago when he had no intention at all of being president.
Actually, it's funny that you should. I want to just get this in because I know Allison wants to say something about how women are just as nasty, if not nastier. But Obama actually has cussed on camera at a what do they call it? The dinners. They have like he would do these dinners like every year, and he had all these celebrities and politicians at these gigantic events, and he
had the establishment. Everyone had his back,
and they would go up there and they would like talk on the microphone for a while. Usually they told jokes, like he had comedians come out. It was actually I think it was the same year maybe that what's his name who has the Tonight Show now, I forget his name, but he went up there and said, I thought Donald Trump was running as a joke. This was when Trump was talking about running for president years ago, and Obama went up there and he made a joke about this Joe Biden thing that leaked a while back, where he was sort of whispering into Obama's ear, and he said, "This is a big fucking deal." And everyone was like, nobody was offended, but they thought it was funny because they thought, this is something that Joe Biden, Joe, got a potty mouth.
Joe, you said a baddie word.
Yeah, that's
Go to
funny.
your room,
this
Joe.
This is you. That's so you.
Joe.
And Obama was on the stage. Yeah, and Obama was up there, and he made a joke about that leak, but he actually said on the stage, that he was talking to Joe, and they were talking about all the food that they had. And Obama said, "This is a big fucking meal." But they bleeped out the fucking. But everyone knows what he said because he was referencing another joke. And he did actually say they just bleeped it out for, TV. But there was no flack for that.
No, hell no.
I don't remember any flack for that.
all sorts of terrible things.
Yeah.
I mean, the media was totally, maybe with the exception of Fox News, was really the only thing that was not completely and totally just wanking Obama for 8 years. He was a star. He was a celebrity. He could do no wrong.
Like Trudeau.
Absolutely no wrong. Like Trudeau. Trudeau can do no wrong at all. Exactly the same. Exactly the same thing. But, there's a reason that Trump is your president, and Obama had a huge part to play in that.
You can't do wrong if you don't do anything at all.
It's only hateful, and it's only... non-inclusive when men do it, and it's a shame because these really are the most inclusive things you can do. Gaming and these hobbies. Whenever you talk about anything from WoW, World of Warcraft, to Warhammer, to Settlers of Catan, or If you're talking about Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh or any of that stuff, Super Smash Brothers, video games are in Sargon puts this in a good way. Gaming is a meritocracy where everybody, no matter who you are, comes together and goes to the same playing field, and they all follow the same rules, and then their skill determines who the winner is. And it is the breach of that meritocracy, like pay-to-win elements, things like that, that makes people not like the games. It's that balance that people really like. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, you can do good. And people conflate oftentimes just the simple fact that women aren't as prevalent in something as, well, obviously that means that men are keeping them out.
Yeah. Let me ask you, because you know, your stream was like 2.5 hours, so just to give like the short version of it, how important is things like representations of multiple sexes, genders? You know what? There are 2 genders, so let's just say sex, race, sexuality. How important is that shit to you in video games?
It depends on the game, really. I mean, there's a lot of video games where it doesn't matter at all. Doom guy could be Doom woman. It wouldn't be as manly, but it could work. I mean, pretty much for the most part, pretty much any.
If there was if a new Doom came out like next year and there was just a woman, you wouldn't find that weird? Like suddenly they just changed the protagonist?
No, it would be weird.
Okay.
Yeah. If it was a woman from the start, then that would be different.
Like
I mean,
Tomb
Samus
Raider
was a woman from the start.
Yeah,
like Tomb Raider. You, instead of being Lara Croft or whatever, instead of being Miss Croft, you could be, you know, Bobby
Nathan Drake.
Yeah. And it'd still be the same. All right, the game isn't based around her being a woman. It's based around a character who is a woman. I mean, her and that comes up in the video I'm doing now. When you take things like Horizon Zero Dawn, when you take things like Tomb Raider, and a lot of these games that have, like Metroid, Samus Aran, she's not who she is because she's a woman. She is a hero and a warrior who is a woman.
Right.
Like her womanness has nothing to do with it.
Right. Her character, like her personality and how she relates to the setting and her abilities and skills, all of those things come before the fact that she's female. The fact that she's female is just sort of it's just a trait. It's like, and she's a woman.
Right. Yeah. You just notice it really quickly because, okay, I'm a living, breathing human being, and I can recognize the differences in sex. So it's a physical aspect of somebody. Representation of gender and sexuality and all that stuff is dependent on the game because it can feel shoehorned in when it's not necessary. And if you have games that try to tell narratives or set a historical place that they're trying to recreate, or if things just don't make sense, then having inclusiveness to the point of absurdity can draw away people's enjoyment of the game because it is unrealistic and unimmersive.
Like Battlefield 1.
Or like Battlefield 1, for instance. I mean, it's weird to see a bunch of black Germans on the European front in World War I. Yeah. It is a little bit, it is strange.
It makes you think something is up. Right.
It makes me think, gosh, it's like they had an agenda. It's like they had this diversity quote they had to. It is a bunch of fucking Swedes, so who knows? They have their own issues to deal with, but it does seem it's very, very out of place. Not for the American side, but for the Germans. The Germans in World War I. No, that's not. And people bring up those stuff in Europe and things like that. No, the Allied blockade prevented Germany from being able to trade and communicate with its colonies properly. There were basically no Germans in the European front in the war. Don't even go there. Didn't happen. Everything has a stereotype. Everything does. And for gays, that's just kind of it.
That's the thing.
That's theirs.
I've noticed with social justice warriors, when they are trying to push for inclusion or they discuss things like diversity and inclusion in any media, they don't realize just how much prejudice they have for those groups because they have expectations. They have expectations from what people from the groups that they tend to want to look out for. They have expectations about what their behavior and their culture and their appearance is supposed to be. And it actually shows how prejudiced they are. As an example,
Absolutely.
There is a new series from Netflix coming out later this month called Iron Fist, based on the comic book character of the same name. And Iron Fist was always a white guy that knew martial arts. He, was a rich kid, went to Kunlun, learned training kung fu, and came back to the States to fight crime. It's basically really totally straightforward. And people were crying about the fact that he wasn't Asian when they announced the casting. Now, aside from the fact that Iron Fist has always been white, and that to make him Asian is weird, I also had to tell, because I got into it with people on social media about it. I was like, so what you're saying is the martial artist character should be Asian, and that is your idea of fighting against stereotypes. That's your idea of like trying to be inclusive and pushing for diversity.
Exactly.
Should he be that, or should he be a super genius, be really good at math?
We hope you enjoyed this clip show. If there was a clip from these shows you think we should have shown, please leave a comment on the original video and include a timestamp. Thank you, and Badger on.